In a few minutes, you're going to hear an interview that I did with Susan Stokes at the Kosciuszko County Recycling. Recycling is good. It's a good thing to have in our town. But we're in a predicament. As an artist, I want you to really think through the situation that we are in as a culture, where we're creating things for the marketplace with the understanding that it's temporary. So when we design a car, a refrigerator, a television, a computer, the expectation is that it will only last for a certain amount of time, and then that will go into potentially recycling, but probably more than likely into the landfill. And we know that as designers and as creators that we're making things that someday, if you keep your product too long, if you keep your cell phone too long and people see it, they will tease you for having an old cell phone. You won't be celebrated for having an old cell phone. You will be admired for taking your cell phone and disposing of it, and it ends up in a landfill or recycling and getting a new one. And that is what people regard as being noteworthy. You're a designer, you're an artist, you're a creative problem solver. I want you to think about recycling and our trash, how it's picked up from our homes, how we produce and package things, and how we recycle, how we put things in landfills. I want you to really kind of wrestle with all of these issues and find a place where you can settle in and do sketches and come up with ideas that deal with either our packaging, how we buy things, whether we're always purchasing things for ourselves or whether we're renting or we're sharing things in a community. Look at the past, at how we handled trash and consumable goods. Think about the future and ask yourself, how can you weigh into this situation and try to figure out some solutions that could be fiscally viable for our grandchildren? Or do we continue the way we're going now? Do we continue to just buy things and break things and dig a hole and bury it? What are some solutions? If you're like me, you have more questions than answers. But that's your job for this project, is I want you to really think through every aspect. I think you're going to appreciate the interview with Susan Stokes, and it may just simply add to the complexity, but I think it'll inform you. Today I'm talking to Susan Stokes, and she is with the Kosciuszko County Recycling. And as we make art, and one of the goals with making effective art is to pull in themes that are applicable to our life in a variety of ways. And one of the things that's been dear to my heart has been recycling and reusing and trying to figure out how to make a more sustainable environment. And so Susan has graciously agreed to jump on with me today and just talk a little bit about her job and how she kind of plugs into this whole process. And then we're going to be doing a little bit of a Q&A. So hi, Susan.
So I am the Education Outreach Coordinator here at KC Recycling. So that means my job is to educate all of the residents and members of Kosciuszko County, whether they are preschool age up through adult, not only about the programs we have here at KC Recycling, but about different ways to recycle, different ways to be green, things they may not know about, things they may not have thought about before. Recycling, especially our programs and in this county, encompasses a lot of different items that a lot of people may not think about. We take everything from shoes to crayons to medical sharps to the traditional paper, plastic, and metal. We also take back household chemicals and electronics. So we move literal semi-loads of electronics every month that get reclaimed for recycling. And we also do the same amount in household chemicals about every other month that we take in from the county.
How long have you been with the company?
I have been here just over 2 years at this point. I was a pharmacy technician for about 8 years. So I got really interested in recycling when it came to seeing how much medical waste is created. Just everything that gets thrown away on a daily basis in a hospital. It really made me think maybe there's a better method to take care of some of this stuff, or there's more out there than I, remembered from growing up. The commercials of the styrofoam being thrown along the side of the road, and you see the pictures of the turtles and the animals with the pop rings around their faces, and it's a lot more to it now than there was back then, for sure.
The story of the first Americans and how they would use every part of the buffalo. So they would hunt and they would figure out a way to use every part of it, including its excrement, for heating, for their fires at night and so on. We're so far removed from that in our culture. And sometimes I know as a consumer, I feel overwhelmed with the choices that I have in terms of purchasing and how the whole process works. Can you walk us through from the time we pull up and empty our recycling into the bins?
When you throw your items in the bin, the first thing you notice is every bin takes all of the same things. Previously, they had the bins separated out for plastic. They had the ones for cardboard, the ones for different paper products. They switched to a single stream recycling a few years ago in hopes to increase participation from residents. They were thinking if they took away the barrier of having to separate down into categories, that it would increase participation. We do move several tons of recyclings in a month. However, 30% of that is contamination at this point. So when people drop off their recycling, if they're not dropping off the correct items, it contributes to contamination. So everything that gets put inside our bins is picked up at this point by Whitley Environmental. They take it to their location in Columbia City, and everything is dumped out onto what they call the tipping floor. So the big trucks you see to pick everything up, they back into the warehouse, they dump everything out. Whitley is a manual sort for the most part. So they'll have guys there who are throwing the plastic into a pile, who move the paper into a pile. Previously, when we were serviced by Borden's, those started the same way with the tipping floor, but they have an automated materials reclamation facility up there. So everything we get pushed with the front loader onto a conveyor belt. And then through that conveyor belt, there was different fans for blowing off paper, different magnets for pulling up different metals. They've really tried to get it to where it's as automated as possible in these bigger facilities, because if you go to manual sort, it's actually pretty dangerous. You never know what's been thrown in those bins, and things can get moved around at a pretty high rate of speed. So everything is moved out. It's separated then into its own piles, and then it is what they call baled. So it is squished down into a compact form, wrapped with twine or other material. And then these bales are set aside, oftentimes outside or in a warehouse, until somebody purchases them. Market being so low for the price of purchasing material really has hindered recycling efforts. Last time I checked, paper by the ton was -2 cents. You can't even get it sold at this point. And paper is something that can be recycled up to 7 times before it's not good anymore. So that's something that we can use a lot of, and it's just not selling.
Unbelievable. Wow. So going back to what you said earlier, did it help to not require people to sort, or did you see it stay stagnant? Was it an incentive that people could just dump everything that's recyclable, or did you see a difference?
It depends on how you look at the situation. If your outcome is to get more people across the board to recycle, then yeah, it's definitely helped. It's always, it's like sorting laundry. If you throw everything into one pile and throw it into the laundry machine, it cuts down on your time, you get it done faster, you feel like you're more accomplished when you finish that laundry. But if you look at the fact that contamination has gone up so high, it has really caused some issues. So previously, when they had cardboard, the bins had maybe a couple inch opening on them, so you had to flatten the boxes. and only the boxes would fit inside there. The problem with that is it gets costly to run trucks back and forth to pick up individual bins.
Yeah.
So it depends on what your overarching goal is. It's great that
Yeah.
people want to recycle. It's better if they want to recycle right.
Yeah. So what percentage of the material that gets dumped off that is for recycling are you able to recycle? Is there like a certain percentage of material that ends up going into the landfill anyway because people aren't correctly doing what they're supposed to do with recycling?
The last time we did an audit, I think we're at 26% contamination. So 26% of what gets picked up minimum goes to the landfill.
And that's what you mean by the word contamination. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, contamination would be anything that is not meant to be in the recycling bin. So garbage bags, plastic wrap, things with food inside them, actual kitchen trash, plastics that aren't able to be recycled. A lot of times people do what we call wish cycling, where they throw items into the bin because they wish they could be recycled, or they just don't take the time to properly clean out, like a peanut butter jar. If you can make half a sandwich of peanut butter left from what's in that jar, you can't recycle it. If that gets into the line, it's going to get tossed out into the landfill pile anyways.
Yeah. How clean do things have to be when you're recycling, like detergent containers and so on? I mean, you pretty much have to run hot water through it, or you wouldn't put it in the dishwasher, I'm assuming, right?
Some people do.
Okay.
Some like hardcore recyclers will put their things in the dishwasher first, just to ensure that they'll be taken by the recycling.
Okay.
Yeah, like the peanut butter, if you can make half a sandwich out of it, it's too much in there. If you've got a little bit of sauce left in a jar, that's pretty negligible. The problem is if that sauce leaks out onto a paper product, then the paper product can't be recycled.
You're always trying to weigh out the ultimate good. And so an example, I remember when I was a young driver, I would drive from one gas station to the next to save a little bit of money from my cost of gas. But then, I'm spending money driving, right? So you're always kind of weighing that out. How do you advise people in terms of the overall good when you think about gasoline and transporting things and recycling? Is there what can you tell us as a consumer of how do we get the most bang for our buck, I guess is what I'm asking for.
The biggest thing I can say to that is if you're not going to do it right, don't do it at all. Because it's way cheaper to transport trash to the landfill than it is to transport recycling to our facility and then have it wind up in the landfill. The markets have been down for a couple of years. Yes, it's true. It's cheaper at this point to produce items from virgin material. That doesn't mean to stop recycling, though. Unfortunately, we live in such a convenience-based society. Instead of going and buying a large tub of yogurt, we buy the little ones, or they buy the Go-Gurt tubes or things like that. So it's not beneficial just to stop altogether because we don't have the space to keep accumulating trash. Like our landfill in our county maybe has 10 to 15 more years on it because they do studies on how high it's getting and how much volume they can continue to put inside there. And that's not a unique situation. Landfills are filling up all over the place. And every time you throw a plastic bottle into there that could have been recycled, it's just adding to it.
Yeah, there's a learning curve with this. And, I remember being down at the Winona Lake Park and a young couple showed up and they're sitting in their car and they're enjoying the sunset, right? And they're enjoying nature. And then as he's getting ready to leave, he opens his car door and lays his Dairy Queen bag of trash on the pavement, shuts the door and drives away. The cruel irony of it is he picked that spot because it was beautiful and clean to be with his girlfriend, and then left it awful for other people. And I think about recycling. It's a journey from consuming things that make a lot of trash, and then even being willing to clean up after yourself. right? And putting trash where it belongs, to then recycling. And then the last big hurdle for the really pure at heart is trying to buy things that don't create so much trash,
Yeah.
buying things, trying to avoid extra bags, extra things. What advice would you give in terms of how to eliminate a lot of the even recycling and trash? What are steps that people could take?
Recycling is a man-made cycle. If we don't participate in it, it's not going to keep going. And no one's going to force you to recycle. So you really have to get to the point where you want to do the right thing and you want to participate in keeping things nice and clean and healthy. There's little things like looking how much plastic wrap is on an item you're buying, or choosing not to use a produce bag when you go to pick up produce. Or if you look inside a cardboard box, if the inside of a product box is white, that is brand new paper pulp that they've used to make that product. If you look inside a box and it's brown, they've used recycled paper pulp to make that. Just remembering things like that, well, this time I got this macaroni and it was white inside. Maybe next time I'll find a different brand. And if it's brown, I already know they're using post-consumer recycled content. So just little things like that. But it's so hard to get away from making trash because we just don't have anything better to do with some things that we come in contact with.
There used to be this incentive. I remember when I was a kid, there was this this kid in my neighborhood was getting really rich, and we're like, man, how are you making all this money? And he's like, I'm going around picking up aluminum cans from the side of the road, and then I smash them down. And like we were like, wow, like this is better than the jobs we were doing. And the incentives have changed, and it really does have to be more that you want a better world than to do it for the money, to recycle bottles. And as a teacher, I see so many kids buying water bottles, and right now it's been difficult because with COVID, the water fountains are turned off, but we go through so many water bottles.
The best thing to do is to try and remove barriers that people may have encountered with recycling. If those kids are buying the water bottles, just having the receptacles available for recycling, and not just in one or two areas, but anywhere that you could stick one, to encourage them, instead of putting this in the trash, throw it in here for recycling. Because those number one bottles, the flexible water ones, those are still highly recyclable. It's all about becoming a habit. And as you get older, you don't realize how hard it is to make a positive habit. Some things that you do now are so ingrained from when you were younger. So it's really important, as my job as the educator, working with the younger students, to make them kind of understand the why of what we're doing, why we're doing it. Because I'm that kind of kid. If I don't understand why something works, I'm not going to do it. It's just hard for me to get it into my head. But to know that, if it's collected, it will be recycled. That's a big thing.
Why do some grocery stores take plastic bags?
That is called plastic film. It's a certain type of plastic. Even though it may have the recycling symbol on it, it's not taken in traditional recycling programs because of the different polymers used to make that kind of plastic. It doesn't break down in the same way. So what they do is they collect it, and it's kind of like collecting loose paper. It gets put in these huge bales, and there are certain companies that will take those and they will recycle them. You can put the produce bags can go in there, bread bags can go in there, dry cleaning bags can go in there, bubble wrap can go in there. Those are all kinds of plastic film. And if they get put into the regular recycling bins, especially if it's somewhere that has the automated MRF, those will tangle up the machine and they'll actually break down the lines, and it stops the whole process for a couple hours while they dig them out. So it's important. Other than, when you see them flying through the country and everything, stuck on fence posts and stuck on buildings and in trees alongside the road, it's not only are they unsightly, but, to animals, those can look like food. They're moving along and they're not sure what it is, and they can get into their mouths and start eating it. And it can cause more problems than just not looking nice.
When you and I talked about this earlier, that I had this misconception that when I take trash, a trash bag out of a trash can, I have to take the whole thing out and put it in my trash receptacle. But that's not true. That you can actually just dump the trash out,
Mhm.
and the trash company will dump it onto the truck. They don't need everything to be in bags, and I think that's a huge misconception, that everybody thinks that we're being good stewards of the land when we get all of our leaves and all our trash tightly in bags. Talk a little bit about bags, trash bags.
You know, what's funny is when you look back at how trash used to be processed and collected, like in the early 1900s, they were in big steel drums. They collected everything inside their house, took it outside, and dumped it in the streets. Some of them had pigs that roamed the streets that would eat through the garbage. Some of them had horse and buggies that came along and put it into the back of this wagon and took it out and dumped it somewhere else. The bags are truthfully a thing of convenience. Like, why do you put a bag in your trash can? Well, you don't want things to start to smell. You don't want sticky things everywhere. We're just so ingrained to want to put everything in this bag so we can cinch it up and throw it out. If you've ever watched when that trash goes into the back of the truck, it gets tossed in there, it gets smashed up. It doesn't have to be in a bag. You know, I I don't really advocate for just throwing like raw meat and stuff into your trash can and letting it hang out there, but you know, it's you don't have to put things in bags. You know, you've got those big 96-gallon totes that they pick up from the side of your house. You can go out there and dump it in there, and it's going to get dumped into the truck to the same way.
Yeah. One of the things I do as a teacher, and I know people working at companies, I'll tell my custodian, I'll say, don't just collect. If my trash can's not full, don't take it. Let it get full. I'm fine with it being full. If there's things that smell bad, that's different.
Yeah.
But these bags, in most companies, the bags that they use are big, heavy, hard to break down
Hmm.
bags, and I see tons of those bags leaving classrooms and office spaces that have some trash in it, but they're not even full. So you're not only just dealing with the idea of full bags leaving, but partially empty bags, and even the cost of the bag. I mean, it's a win-win across the board in terms of cost and waste to not simply keep dumping bags into the landfill. It feels like to me.
Well, and
So
that's what so that goes along with recycling is the idea of reuse. So if you haven't thrown something gross into your trash bag, you can certainly dump that trash into something else and reuse that bag again. So like here at the recycling center, in our offices, we'll just take our smaller trash cans and dump them into the bigger one. And then when the bigger one is ready to go, we'll take it out. But it saves us from constantly changing bags over. I mean, we're not throwing away anything more than, you know, Kleenexes and things like that. So it's not that big of a deal. And you find that a lot in offices. We always, when I worked in the hospital, you know, there's central locations where like food and everything gets thrown away, but otherwise it was just packaging and paper and items like that. So it was a lot easier just to dump it into one area and then let that be what gets taken out eventually.
we don't we take our own bags to get groceries, but at those times when you need those bags, those small bags become the kitchen trash bag. So the Walgreen
Mhm.
bag becomes and it can be used for a long time. And it's just like it's just a deliberate choice to say, this is how I'm going to be thrift. I'm going to conserve. You just make the choice, and it's so easy. I remember actually my first graphic design job in Ohio. My boss said, "This is what I do with paper." He grabbed a sheet of paper that had type on it that would normally have been thrown away. He said, he made a big X, turned it over. He says, "You use the back of it." And
Hmm.
I'm like, wow. And then I heard, I learned that in Asia, like big companies that make tons of money will conserve paper by doing things like that. And so it's been a journey to kind of walk through that. There's a certain size of things you do and don't want. Plastic lids for containers? Are those things you're not collecting anymore? What's the situation with that?
Plastic lids get really tricky. If it's the lid from like a water bottle, we always suggest, dumping or finishing the water and putting the lid back on and throwing it in as a whole unit. Some recycling companies will tell you if it's smaller than a credit card, they don't want it, period, no matter what it is. Some of those lids don't fall into the plastic 1, 2, and 3 that we collect here right now at KC Recycling. Like on my bottle here, there's no indication on what this plastic is, but this plastic lid is definitely different than the plastic the bottle is made out of. So, a lot of times you can assume like in butter containers and sour cream containers, those are all the same kind of plastic, but it gets hard when you're dealing with these mixed mediums because do I take it off and throw it in the trash? I do, just because, like I said, it's smaller than a credit card, and I know it's not the same plastic as the bottle. But could you leave it on there and it would be recycled? Possibly. It really that's another huge problem with recycling is there's so much variance between coast to coast and state to state and county to county that some places that's okay and some places that's not okay. And
Yeah.
it's really important to know what your local area does with your recycling to figure out the best way to deal with what you're trying to get rid of.
I was thinking Chicago had areas that required people to sort their trash and have it out.
When I lived in Chicago, we had recycling available to us. It just came along with the trash. But there was no, at least in the area I lived in, there's no mandate that you had to use it. It was just made available to you.
Sure.
It's different than when I was in Seattle last year. Everything there that's plastic that gets used as single-use items either has to be able to be composted or it has to be able to be recycled. So when I went and got breakfast somewhere, the plastic cutlery that I was given actually was able to be composted. And when you're done eating, they had a location for you to throw that material into because it was being collected to be composted. And now that's a citywide maintenance ordinance that they have. But because it's different in bigger cities than it is in rural areas, it's just depends on where you are.
Yeah. How does Indiana fall within the state by state comparison with recycling?
I think in talking to the other solid waste management districts, we have a center in every county. So the state has a solid waste management district and recycling kind of overseer in every county. But it is up to local haulers whether or not they're going to provide it. So like we're in contract with Whitley Environmental here. The city of Warsaw uses Borden's. Winona Lake uses advanced disposal. School system uses advanced disposal. So there's these private contracts that come into play to provide these services to residents. But from talking to people, down in the southern counties, they have locations where they have just semi-trailers set up for people to come and put their recyclables into, and then the solid waste management districts swap those recyclables out for them. Some of them have went to manned recycling sites to keep contamination down so that they can actually get rid of their recyclables and not deal with all the trash in there. Some of them do bigger things like they'll recycle cars or auto parts or these bigger items because they have facilities where they can deal with it. I don't think there's any county in Indiana that doesn't try to make it available to their residents, at least in the urban areas. When you get into the rural areas, it's really on the homeowner to figure out, do I want to recycle and who services me out here? My family lives in the country north of Milford, so you've got to contact your provider and see, if it's possible. And for a long time, my parents didn't recycle, and I really got onto them. Like, they pick it up for you. All you got to do is rinse it out and throw it in there. Like, that's as much as you have to do and take it to the curb every other week. It didn't make sense to me to keep accumulating all this trash and all these things in the trash it could be recycled. And they actually saw a reduction in the amount of trash that they were throwing out by 2 bags in a week. They were throwing that much recyclable stuff away. So you like to think it pays for itself, to be able to not put that stuff in the landfill. But Indiana does pretty good as far as recycling goes.
One of my personal journeys for my wife and I is to get as little trash as possible. One of the things we run into is most waste disposal companies want to pick things up every week. And so you pay a fee for them to come by every week. There's no real incentive to not put out a lot of trash. And I really need the service once a month, because we recycle enough that once a month, one of those big containers is ample enough to take ours. Any hint of anything like that coming down the pike where people that start becoming more aggressive and not having a lot of waste could have a monthly pickup instead of a weekly pickup?
Whether you're putting 1 small bag in there or 3 large ones, they're coming around anyways. So they're already expending that energy and that time to come do it. It would be nice to have a subscription service of some sort where everyone's like, this one day a month you can come get my stuff. But there can always be variances in that too. That may be great for a few months, and then you have 1 month where it kind of gets blown out of the water, and then you're looking for like, hey, can you guys come a second time?
You'd have to be willing to stick with it and see what your disposal needs are. But I wonder, just in a practical way, maybe you have a different colored container so that they go by once a month and pick up the orange ones or whatever. But it's true, there's not a fiscal incentive for them. I mean, they're already going by. There's no incentive to even do it twice a month. It's
I know there are people that don't pay for trash service too, that will take it to like there's the waste management transfer station by the airport here in Warsaw. So you can take your trash there and pay to drop it off. So if you truly had just 1 big bag you collected over the month, it may be more fiscally responsible to go drop that off one time and just take it right to the source. But I know some townships don't allow you to not pay for trash service.
The more you're involved in the process, the more students go to, a site and see where their trash is going. The more we're involved with it, the more the incentive to do less, to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So I think those are all my questions. Any closing words that you want to share?
I mean, just to remember that recycling is a total man-made thing, and if you don't participate in it and you don't keep it going, it will stop. There's not always going to be somebody there beating the drum and leading the charge and, making sure that these services are available, especially right now with things being shut down from COVID and, the whole landscape of our world changing. Our recycling volumes went up really high in March and April when everybody was first home, and it has completely dropped off again. So it's one of those things where we're trying to figure out if they're making more trash, if they're just not going out, if they're just not interested in doing it anymore. So yeah, it's something that I think if you're going to make it a habit for yourself and something that you're interested in, it definitely behooves you to do some research on it, to educate yourself on services available. It may not always be in the best interest to try and convert people to recycle, in your family or your friends or whatever. Because in the long run, what you do is most important because you can only control yourself. So if you are taking responsibility for your trash, then in the long run, you're still helping out.
Sad. Well, thank you very much, and I know you've been a great asset to Kosciuszko County with going into the school systems and educating. So thank you so much for your help.